Okay, we'd like to go ahead with our speaker tonight. We've asked Darr Moon to come talk to us. So we have represented here tonight a couple mineral exploration companies, and we asked Darr to come and speak about the Idaho minerals and what it could mean to the state and to our nation. So Darr and his wife Dorothy, who is the chairman of the Republican Party, they spend a lot of time going throughout the state, and he is a miner over in eastern Idaho out of Chalice, and they have gold mines and anything else that they can find, I'm sure. But I've seen some of the gold specimens he showed us at a summer meeting. I'm thinking, oh my. I asked him, so how do you get the gold out of that? And so anyway, very interesting and very knowledgeable. He does a lot for people and uses his expertise throughout the state. So we'll turn the time over to him.
Thank you, Kurt. You know, that's what I'm here to do, is give everybody a little bit of gold fever. And I think by rights, Idaho, we need to be very proud of our mining history. We've really had quite an enormous mineral inventory in Idaho. And I'm going to give you a little rundown of just why that is and some of the visions that we have for the minerals industry in Idaho and things we need to do. I've got my lovely Dana White here to run the projector. If you can go to the next slide, please. I need to tell you a little bit about myself. I graduated from the University of Idaho School of Mines in geological engineering. I've kind of grown up in the mining family. This is where we live. I don't know if you've been up the Yankee Fork, but we live up the Yankee Fork in central Idaho. This was a placer mine that my dad and I worked in the early days. It was just a mining claim, but in 1983 we filed for patent and received a mineral patent on this land. And so that's now where Dorothy and I live and where we've raised our family. It's important to note that you can no longer patent a mining claim. Congress has put a moratorium on that, and I think that's really too bad. I think we really ought to reoccupy the mountains. You know, that's where our prosperity lies. Next slide, please. So this is just Estes Mountain. We have some mining property on top up here. That's probably in July. So it takes me a while to get back up there. It's a short mining season for us. We're at about 9,000 feet up there. And the next one. Here's my two sons, eligible sons, by the way. We're doing some core drilling, just a small hand core drill. I like to say that all their efforts are in vain. This is just a typical deposit that we find in most of Idaho, and there's a reason for it. Next play, please. This is a little cabin. So I don't know if you've ever been to the little ghost town of Custer, but we have the General Custer Lucky Boy mines, and as part of our cleanup operation to keep the place from burning down, unfortunately we have a lot of dead timber up there. So we bought a small sawmill and began putting it to work and built a little cabin. We actually have two cabins up there now. So we're miners and loggers and whatever it takes to make a living, because it's very difficult in this world, as you might know, in the resource industries in Idaho. Next slide. So I'll get into the meat of the matter. Really, the biggest reason why Idaho is really so blessed with strategic and rare minerals is what's called the Idaho batholith. And this red intrusion into Idaho is a large magma intrusion that has come up from the earth and is the heat engine that's driven all the mineralization in Idaho, and pretty much all down the middle of Idaho, all the way up into the Coeur d'Alenes and beyond. Your little lobe out here where that little bump out is also affected by these fluids that have come up from the magma. So that is the real generator that's emplaced most of the metals. And it's quite interesting suite of metals that's really not found too many other places in the world. And if you'll notice, now this is a picture of Idaho with the federal and BLM lands. The federal lands are in green, and the BLM, mostly grazing lands, are the yellow color. But you'll notice that that matches where the Idaho batholith is mostly. And so most of these metal deposits are on federal lands. Now, back in the day, when people could stake a claim, prove it economic, and get a mineral patent, then it became private property and came into the state as a tax base. But that no longer happens. And it's unfortunate because a huge amount of mineral is available, and yet we cannot tap it. It doesn't seem that the federal government is as interested in mining. In fact, we've kind of gone the other way for now probably 50 years. So mining has kind of had a black eye, and it's unfortunate. Now, this is the beginning of how the batholith was created. You've probably heard of plate tectonics. This is where the plates on Earth are moving. And this North American plate where we live here is overriding the Pacific plate, which is being subducted under this plate. And as it's being subducted down, it's dragging sediments along this continental ridge. And they get down and they begin to melt. And they're more granitic, they're lighter materials, so they bubble up, and that's what's caused the Cascade Range. If you go to Idaho, that's part of some of our mountain building, is that upthrust. And so this is an interesting slide. This is the Trans-Challis fault system. So as you have these plates colliding, one subducting under the other, the North American plate, or where we live, is in compressive stress. And so it's bending up the rocks. And you can see a lot of this as you travel through Idaho. A lot of this area is overlain with basalts from magma flows that have come to surface. But the older rocks, you can see they're folded and twisted. In the Arco area, it's particularly interesting. If you've been there, you'll see all the numbers of the graduating classes up on those limestone cliffs. Well, they're part of this, this thrusting upward. That's where Mount Bora is, and that's how we got pushed up so high. And then erosion has eroded it down and left the valley below. This compressive force has caused stress in the rocks, and they've usually things fracture at about a 45-degree angle to the major compressive force. And the major compressive force, being east-west, has given us this northeasterly strike of faulting. And those faults are deep-seated faults. So they reach down into this magma chamber, and because of that, these fluids have bubbled up and then impregnated the local country rock with the minerals that are abundant now in Idaho. And that's really what brought people to Idaho initially, was mining and the prospecting and the great discoveries of gold in Idaho City. They took more gold out of the Idaho City mines in 1863 than they did in the Alaska Klondike Rush. And those mines really supported the Union, Lincoln's Army. That was the bankroll for it all. So I'll talk a little bit now of some of the diversity of our metals. Jervois is an Australian mining company that was mining in the Salmon area for cobalt. And of course, cobalt is a rare and strategic metal. This mine and this cobalt belt is the only cobalt belt in the Western Hemisphere. And so we are reliant on foreign sources. So the cobalt discovery here is fantastic. It's an opportunity for America to actually mine a very strategic metal. I know a lot of you may know that a lot of the cobalt goes into these electric vehicles and lithium-ion batteries, but it's much more than that. Your little iPod, your phones, that laptop computers, even your drills that have lithium-ion batteries on them have cobalt in them. And this is our only source. Now what happened, they opened the mine last October 7th. They were mining cobalt. It was about $32 a pound. By March of 23, the Chinese flooded the market and dropped the price to $15, and they closed the mine down. And this is very unfortunate because we are now just so dependent, mostly on the Chinese, for cobalt and other strategic metals. And you know, this is how cobalt is mined in the Congo. It's mostly what they call artesian miners and a lot of child labor. There's no environmental controls. And of course, the Chinese control most of that production. And you know, we sort of turn a blind eye to it because it's expedient. And we don't really see the environmental damage done by mining that's not done by professional mining companies. And that is a problem. So we're living a high standard of our standard of living without any of the price that's paid, and it's mostly paid for these people. Now, not only metals, but certainly Idaho's phosphate fields in southeast Idaho are very, very important. We probably would not be the #3 dairy state without all the phosphates to throw on alfalfa, keep those fields, you know, green and growing. This is where our food comes from. We lose the phosphates, and we cannot get the enormous production out of our agriculture industries that we really must have. So this outlined area is part of what was known as the Phosphoria Sea. This is back in the Permian age, back when a lot of the oil was being developed in Texas, and those Permian Basin fields, you may have heard that's where a lot of oil comes. Well, while oil was being essentially made in the Permian Basin in the Texas area, phosphate was being made up here in Idaho and Utah and Wyoming. So that's another very strategic resource. Go ahead with the next one. Here's some of the folding of those phosphate beds. You can just see how there's so many angles to these beds. That's testimony to the mountain building that's gone on in Idaho and the great compressive forces that have pushed these rocks and turned what was in the beginning level beds almost vertical. You know, Idaho is a fantastic place for young people to study geology because we have a beautiful and wide range of geology, a great opportunity for young people to get involved with it. And now I'm going to talk about rare earth elements. You've probably heard about that, but rare earth elements are terribly important, vital to just about everything. All of the new electronic gadgetry, all the computers, high energy magnets. There is so much that is moving. All of the new generation electronics have rare earth elements. And this is, you may find that you remember this from high school, the periodic table. This second from the bottom row, those are the lanthide elements known as rare earth elements. They have interesting properties that really make them very valuable. Go back. The table in that brown are the rare earths. There's also scandium, that's number 21, and yttrium, number 39. These metals are absolutely necessary for any strategic, our strategic defenses. You might say, I'm in my element when I'm talking about these. Go ahead, next slide, Anna. All right, and here again, this is a depiction of the United States where it shows where there are rare earth elements. And there are some here in Florida and Georgia, a little bit in South Carolina and North Carolina, but the vast majority are in Idaho. And if you'll notice that shape, it's following the Idaho batholith, because it was the batholith that emplace these rare earth elements. Next slide, please. And here's just an up close of Idaho with the baffle again. And these are targets. The numbers are some of the mines or discoveries that they have rare earth elements back. Go ahead, next one. So rare earth elements, what do we need those for? You may have heard of these very powerful magnets, neodymium magnets. Well, they are used in all kinds of applications. A lot of the electric motors, frictionless rail systems, and you know, our dependency on these rare earths and these magnets is growing every day, and we must rely upon the Chinese for most of our rare earth elements. Next slide. So as an example, this is an F-35. It requires 920 pounds of rare earth elements for every plane. A destroyer, 5,200 pounds, and a Virginia-class submarine, 9,100 pounds. It's crazy to think that we are under foreign dependence for these very critical strategic elements, and yet they are here in Idaho in quantities abundant enough to mine. Next slide. So who might be the largest producer? Well, it's China, or should we say China. China not only produces 60% of the rare earth elements, they refine about 90%. So there's no refining capacity in America at all. There's one rare earth element mine, the Mountain Pass mine in Southern California, just across from the Nevada border. But the elements that they get there are the lighter fraction of the rare earth elements. And you need those, but you need the heavier fraction. Dysprosium and terbium are necessary for those magnets, because a neodymium magnet, when it heats up, they lose magnetism unless they have the terbium and dysprosium. And guess where that is? Right here in Idaho. Next slide. Okay, so this is a USGS report about the thorium deposits of the United States, in particular in Idaho. Next slide. Now this is the Beaverhead Mountain area in the Lemhi Pass. This is right between Idaho and Montana. Some of the richest thorium deposits and rare earth deposits in the world. And it's interesting that rare earths and thorium all come together through, usually deposited in what's called monazite sands. But they're associated metals, and they're together in these veins that have been discovered in Idaho. And yet we are doing very little about it. Thorium in particular, I think, is a huge opportunity for Idaho, because thorium nuclear power is the next generation of nuclear power. And Idaho would be the Texas of energy if we were to begin mining, developing, and bringing thorium nuclear power on board. Next slide. But no, we're going to spend our money on windmills. And next slide. And solar panels. And all of these are dependent upon Chinese resources. And the problem, obviously, with wind, it doesn't generate power when the wind isn't blowing, and the solar panels don't generate power when the sun doesn't shine. But nuclear power, it delivers all the time. And it's something that Idaho is particularly invested in with our Idaho Nuclear Energy, INL, research lab in southeast Idaho. This chart, this chart kind of gives you an idea of what is called the energy density of material. Now, Dorothy and I, we use wood a lot. We heat our home with wood. And wood's pretty good if you got it. But its energy density is 16 megajoules per kilogram. Now, that doesn't really mean a whole lot, but in relative comparison, so The gasoline that goes in your car is 46 megajoules per kilogram. A gallon of gasoline has about the same equivalent power as 12 sticks of dynamite. It's an incredibly compact fuel. But when you start looking at nuclear fuels, uranium-235 has 3,900,000 kilojoules per kilogram. So 1 little kilogram would operate everybody's need for electricity, any single person, for the rest of your life and for all of your power needs that are associated with heating your share of this building, the roads that are laid down, all of the energy that goes in it. So now this is uranium power. Thorium power is similar, a little bit less, but they say yes, a ball of uranium or of thorium that you can hold in your hand is the equivalent of all the energy you will use and your share of energy in all of the development and all the public works projects. Next slide, please. So this is how it compares to a nuclear plant and wind power. Here we have 2,077 2-megawatt wind generators versus 1 equivalent nuclear power plant. You know, we're spending millions and billions really on wind power energy and forsaking a resource that we have right here in Idaho. So it's something that we need to begin thinking about. The political minds need to think about this because there is a solution to our energy needs and to our strategic metal needs. And it really is here in Idaho. Next slide. So meantime, China has now developed a thorium package nuclear plant. It is now up and running. It's the first one in the world. It's operating in the Gobi Desert. China expects to have about 15% of their electricity from thorium nuclear power by 2035. And we're nowhere near there. We're well behind. This is an opportunity for our young minds to advance into these fields because America needs them. We are falling behind the Chinese and really the rest of the world. Next slide. So not only do we have thorium, this is some tantalum and niobium resources in the Bear Valley. They dredged for in the 1950s after World War II. They needed to replenish the strategic stockpile. And I'll move on again. Niobium is a high metal alloy, and tantalum is used mostly in the electronics world in capacitors and resistors. And then antimony and tungsten. Antimony and tungsten is a huge strategic necessity, especially in wartime. You must have tungsten to make armor, and you need antimony as a hardening agent for munitions, bullets, and things like that. Next slide. So in 1939, seeing that the world was aiming towards World War II, Congress enacted the Strategic Materials Act, and they began looking for these metals, and they came to Idaho. In fact, this is a poster about the Stibnite Mining District. That's just east of McCall in the Stibnite Yellow Pine area, because that's where America got their antimony and tungsten. Next slide. And this is a Western Union telegram to the men and women of the Bradley Mining Company in Stibnite, Idaho. This is during World War II. And this message is from the commander of the Allied Forces, Eisenhower, thanking the men at the Stibnite mine for producing the antimony and tungsten that they needed to successfully win the war in North Africa initially. Next slide. And then this is an op-ed that came out shortly after, and it talks about, in the opinion of the Munitions Board, the discovery of the tungsten mine in Stibnite, Idaho in 1942 shortened World War II by at least 1 year and saved the lives of 1 million American soldiers, because we had the resources to put an end to it. We don't today. We have the resource, but we don't have the mine. Next slide. This is Thompson Creek in Clayton, Idaho. This is very close to where we live. This is a molybdenum mine. Molybdenum is a steel hardening agent also, It's also used in lubricants. So here at this mine, the high-grade moly products go for steel refineries, and the low-grade goes to the lube industry. And you may use moly lube or have heard of that. It's an interesting metal because it's kind of greasy. It slides, and so it's used as lubricant. And that's one of the few single-source molybdenum mines in the United States. There's another one in Climax, Colorado. They get molybdenum as a byproduct from copper mining quite often. But anyway, here again, the Chinese are cleaning our clock. They're the largest producers in the world of molybdenum. Next slide. And this is the 2017 U.S. net import reliance. This is from the USGS. This was they've updated this. There's a 2022. It's just about the same. When Ryan Zinke was Secretary of Interior under Trump, he put this chart together to give people an idea in Congress of what our dependency is. And you'll note from arsenic and all the way down that most of our imports, these are all 100% imported. Here I see thorium 100%. That's an Idaho metal. There's tantalum. Fluorspar is actually being mined right now in the Chalice area. Graphite, I see that. So Idaho could be a big player. Idaho has a strategic source. Next slide, please. Some of these elements are difficult to recover in the refining process because we have no refineries for these in America. This is a refinery that uses a vapor method for extracting these metals, and is completely environmentally safe. I'm going to rush through here a little bit. Go to the next one. So here's what I want to end up with. Idaho has the University of Idaho, which had a great school of mines. They closed it in the year 2000. We must bring our young people into these industries so we can compete with the Canadians and the Australians and the Chinese. Boise State, I've given this lecture to the Boise State Materials Science Department. These are the kids that are building computer chips. Well, we can't build computer chips without some of these rare earth elements. So here we've got the resource, we've got the university, and of course Idaho State University has a great nuclear school, and we have INL. So why aren't we out there developing our resources, educating our young people to compete with the rest of the world? And then this is the gold fever part. So this is some of the gold ore. It's hardly gold ore. It's pretty much gold that we're finding up on the Yankee Fork. So anyway, that one's kind of neat. It's kind of in a blue amethyst matrix. And that's some. If you get to the up the Yankee Fork, you can stop at the dredge, and that's some of our gold. But anyway, I hope to impress upon you, to give you a little gold fever, to let our legislators, our political people know that we don't need to live on our knees. Idaho's metals can fix all of our potholes, make all of our schools whole, and bring prosperity back to a generation that is just going to be, if they don't own property, they'll never have it. So I thank you all for listening to me, and I hope to do this again sometime soon.